Hello, everyone. Happy third day of TwitchCon. How is it going so far?
Good.
Fantastic. I'm really glad to hear that. Today, during this panel, our title is Positive Influence, the Power of Community Building, and we are going to be focusing on how community engagement on Twitch is a wide industry and personal front on all aspects and different ways that you can interact with your own community and use your influence in a positive way to assist others. This is something that we feel is often overlooked, but quite important for future building of not only your own cast, not only someone's cast that you moderate for, but also potentially getting into the video game industry within PR, marketing, game development, and so on, or taking these skills that you have learned, build them properly for your resume or CV, and apply them to a totally different industry. And so we're going to start with introductions. My name is JessyQuil. I'm a full-time IT system administrator during the day, and I stream in the evenings and weekends very sporadically and casually, and I talk about psychology and mental health and cybersecurity depending on the game or the way the conversation goes within my community.
Hi there, my name is The Metaphor Gaming. I'm a full-time broadcaster here on Twitch for close to 3 years now. I am an organizer for Twitch Denver, and I have been trying to make sure that we get this panel going for over 1.5 years now.
I am Metamancer. I am also a community lead, actually founded Twitch Texas, which has 4 chapters in Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston. We've been doing that for 2 years. I am a product manager by day, and I stream once a week a D&D style horror role play on my channel on Sundays. So yay, D&D. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really glad we're talking about this because I think it needs to be said and more people need to hear about it.
Yeah, definitely. You're going to have to bear with me. I'm starting to lose my voice. It's been a long weekend. My name is xNikkib. I am a broadcaster currently, but I also have done community management, and we do a bi-weekly show called Mental Health Support on Twitch. So we talk a lot about a lot of different mental health discussions. Like we kind of like to bring personal experience into it as well, so it's not just like you're talking to, like you're not talking to professionals, you're talking to people that have suffered with mental illnesses and other issues as well. So it's really exciting to talk about like positive influence and community building and just kind of bringing that to everyone that kind of forgets or like doesn't really think that that's a huge role in Twitch.
Fantastic, thanks. So our first topic that we kind of wanted to get the ball rolling on is just your positive influence personally as you, the broadcaster, the quality of the conversation that you bring out and foster on and off cast within Discord, within your actual stream, on your Twitter, and so on. And Nikki and Metamancer are going to focus a little bit on that. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I do like mental health support. We started it to kind of just bridge that gap between talking about mental health on Twitch, because it's a huge thing that some people don't really like to address, and I totally understand that. And it's kind of just to let people know that they're not alone, and like there is someone that you can talk to, whether they're professionals or whether they're just someone that can be your friend. Yeah, it's really exciting. I'm sorry, I'm like dying
okay.
slowly.
To kind of just a little bit piggyback off of that, my university degree is in psychology, and for a while when I first started broadcasting 3 years ago, it was just, oh, let me play some like old games that I liked, and eventually you find out as a broadcaster, in order to really shine and have something unique and interesting to give to the community as a whole, you need to have a shtick or a niche. And for me, I already knew a lot about psychology and mental health, so it was just a natural transition into incorporating that into my broadcast. And I do nearly weekly blog posts and chats on my stream about things that might come up within like a psychological horror, or why certain things scare us the way they do, or Hellblade is a recent game that came out and they used a lot of assistance from the University of Cambridge for mental health professionals to say this is how you properly show how psychosis and schizophrenia occurs through the character that you are playing. And so trying to focus on games and topics like that to show people that they're not alone in what they're doing is a wonderful way to build your community. Find something that you are good at and you are passionate about and bring it to Twitch.
Yeah, I like that general concept of bringing awareness to mental illness, and I think what comes down to it is a lot of people, how many broadcasters do we have in here? Just a lot of you guys.
A lot, yeah.
And I am willing to bet that more often than not, people come into your channel because they've had a long day at work or they just want to get away from what they've experienced. And you guys probably feel like you have a responsibility to help bring that relief to them. And I think that that's really important, not just on a larger community sense, but on an individual level. One thing that's really rewarding for me is I only run one show a week now. That's a decision I made about 2 months ago as part of my own mental health and reducing my stress, because I do work full time and I do stream Texas as well. But I found that people were coming in and saying, this is a really entertaining show. I broadcast for 4 hours and we create this entire kind of almost like TV show experience where the streamers that are there are role playing and they're acting out their character and voice acting. They dress up like their character, and people come in and that's what they can look forward to every Sunday, and they're like, this is the show that I come and watch. And I think that's applicable to everybody who puts on a show on Twitch, is they expect you to be there. And I think that's why a lot of people say consistent schedules are really important, because
Definitely.
they want to be there. They're like, hey, you come on at 5 o'clock every evening during these special days of the week, and I expect to be able to come in there. Now, granted, everybody has their own life and they have to take breaks, and that's great. It's just one of those things that when you're building that community, that's the positive influence that you guys are creating, is being able to create a home for those people. So that's kind of my take on the individual. And I know me and John also, we kind of share the idea behind why we created the community meetups, and that kind of extends outside of our individual channels. So I don't know if you wanted to speak to that.
Of course, especially when it comes to setting up a meetup and when it comes to setting up things that really get people out of their houses, really get people to enjoy their time with other people, especially going to TwitchCon, things like that. I can pretty much bet that some of my own community members that are in the audience right now, how much I hounded them to actually come to the convention, because it's very much so this experience of being able to get out of your comfort zone, be able to actually, be around people who also might still be, a little nervous about meeting people, or just making sure that you all feel like you can be in a community together. That's probably one of the biggest things. So whether it be my own broadcast, Twitch Denver, I've tried to have this very welcoming and very, close-knit kind of feeling to whatever I do. And so making sure that you can translate that as a broadcaster through your actions, through your posts online, whatever it may be, it's probably one of the most essential things to remember, that every word, every action you do will have weight. And hopefully you try and put it in a positive direction so that the people who are investing time in you get a good investment back for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as dirty as the word seems to some people, influencer is something that we all do, even if we're not a broadcast. We influence our younger siblings, we influence our coworkers based on the hobbies that we have and the way that we interact with them and react to certain events and experiences to and about them. So keeping that in mind and making sure that you're putting your best foot forward and usually trying to focus on positivity gives you this feedback loop of being a kind person makes you feel nice and makes everyone else nice, and we all really enjoy that kind of environment and experience for everyone, and so that's why we want to try to push why this is so important.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing. For the word influencer, it extends way beyond broadcasting. Mm-hmm. Broadcasting is a way to just reach more people, but every day that you interact with somebody, whether it's at the grocery store with the cashier or a family member that you haven't talked to in a while, you're constantly influencing the behavior of other people, and they're also influencing you, and there's that exchange. So I don't know if you guys have ever experienced a moment where you're in a really great mood and then somebody around you, not even interacting with you directly, has like a really bad attitude, and they're maybe yelling at like somebody that's getting coffee for them, whatever, and then you kind of feel that energy and you're soaking that in, and so it's up to you to make sure that what you're casting out there is a positive energy to counteract that. And something that's really nice to have is somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I know who you are, and you've made a difference in my life. And that's something I think a lot of the broadcasters have experienced. And if you haven't experienced it yet,
Your day.
yeah, if you
just a
haven't
matter of
experienced
time.
it, yeah, no, like, but you will.
Yeah.
Somebody will come up to you at some point, and they'll say, "You made a difference in my life." And I think that even if it's just somebody who doesn't necessarily watch your stream but knows who you are, or maybe it's from Twitter or whatever other social media, there's an option for them to say, "Hey, that's been a positive influence." So.
Yeah, it's definitely like, it's easy to let negativity get to you, but it's also very easy to adapt that positive attitude where if someone around you is negative and you're just like, no, I'm not going to let it bother me, sorry. Like, no, I'm not going to let it bother me, and I'm just going to continue being positive. And it can get hard some days, and I truly understand that. But it can also change your day, but also everyone around you as well.
Yeah, each person that you interact with, it's a chain effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And just really quickly, it's okay to feel negative emotions and have a
Definitely.
negative
Oh, yeah, big
reaction
time. Yeah,
to
yeah.
an experience, but the way that you present that publicly, like don't throw people into witch hunts because you might not have all the facts of what's going on in that situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a word of caution.
You don't have to walk around smiling and stuff.
Yeah,
That's
because
ridiculous.
Right.
That's
Being-
ridiculous. No one can
being
do that.
completely
Even if we're
positive
trying to right now, yeah.
every day.
It's okay to have to take a mental health day or
Yeah.
two from your stream or totally change your schedule
Yeah.
because it's not working out for you.
Yep.
There's something called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and at the bottom there are very basic sort of security and making sure that you are in homeostasis, meaning that you have food and water and sleep all in balance. And then as you slowly go up this scale, there are social interactions with other human beings and making sure that those are fulfilling and positive and a beneficial exchange of give and take. And then finally at the very top is creativity and self-actualization. And that's where Twitch falls. So if you are unable to have a relatively balanced foundation of all of these other different steps, and there's a little bit more here and there, but these are the basics of it. When you try to broadcast on Twitch, or if you try to moderate for a broadcaster and you're just not feeling it, you're not going to be able to bring the best of you to these things. And so you need to make sure that you are engaging in self-care for yourself as well.
Very much agree.
Yeah.
So the next topic we have is how to move from just being a broadcaster or a moderator for a few people and learn how to get into things such as a bigger city sort of community, Meetup, which we've touched on a little bit, and then also getting into either the video game industry or wrapping that into another industry and showing your things. So really quickly, I used to work full-time at a video game PR firm, and some of the things that I learned was that there were smaller broadcasters. This was before affiliate, but like these people would be like within, like either they just started streaming or like they just aren't able to get partnered because they don't have the numbers or so on. And they were always saying, well, I'm just not good enough, or there's no way I can ask for a code for this AAA game or have a developer come and do an interview in my chat. That's not true. If you show like, hey, I really like Ubisoft games, and here is a history of my VODs playing them, and this is something that I've been able to really build my community with and show like actual numbers with that. Even if it's like you went from 10 viewers to 15 viewers, that is a huge increase in ratio-wise. And so just being able to have that organization and learning that your community does mean something, even if it's comparatively different to other people's. And so from my experience within the video game industry and doing PR like that, I absolutely loved finding passionate, smaller streamers because they usually put so much effort into trying to make sure that their community is very tight-knit. And there's also been data released a few years ago from Twitch's Danny Hernandez that said that the majority of game sales and clicks on certain types of links when they're posted in chat come from the mid-tier and smaller range streamers, from like anywhere from 50 to 1,000 viewers. And that seems like a really broad spectrum, but like that's the middle ground of Twitch in general. So just being able to kind of keep that in mind and realize that when you have a strong-knit community who talks on and off cast with you, and they really take your recommendations to heart because you are influencing them, that is something that you can understand that you are building your community in a positive and fulfilling way for everyone involved.
The same, like to add on to that, is like if you're reaching out on behalf of a broadcaster, not as the broadcaster yourself. So for example, when I did community management, I used to reach out to game companies on behalf of broadcaster. It's understanding that you're going to respond to things differently than the broadcaster would, and that's totally okay. But also understanding what they are looking for as well as what the company is looking for. So you don't want to go in there blind. Basically, you want to know your metrics, you want to know everything else, but you also want to understand that you're not reaching out on behalf of yourself. So if you go in there with a negative attitude because they sent you a message that's like, sorry, no, you're out of luck, don't take it personally and don't get angry about it. Just kind of say, okay, thank you for your time and thank you for talking to me, and just kind of try and keep that positive, like it was an experience and you know what to work on for next time.
Exactly, yeah.
I think that comes to something that we value very greatly in the stream text community, something that I kind of brought in as part of setting up the entire community is the concept of a win-win or no deal. And it seems like a really silly thing to say to some degree, but it's a uncompromising mindset where both parties need to benefit mutually in the exchange. And that's not just between you and a business, that's between you and another broadcaster, you between a moderator or a viewer even to a degree. And they're on different scales, right? So for a business, their purpose is to make a profit. I mean, everybody should know that. And so how are you going to make a profit? Profit isn't necessarily always a financial profit. There's a value add that you can provide as a broadcaster saying, hey, I have this much influence in my community, and here, again, are my metrics. Here's the way that I plan on engaging them. And it's not just here's my information. It's, here's my plan. Here's my strategy. And that goes way, way farther than just saying, I want to do this thing. Can you give me a game code?
Exactly.
Yeah, like this is how I plan to help you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's something that it's taken some time to create, because there's a lot of engagement with companies, and as you guys have seen, if you've been to other TwitchCons or any other conventions, the attendance is always growing. So you can imagine companies aren't being created as much as new viewers or moderators or broadcasters are coming up, right? Like we're growing way faster than businesses are. So think about it from the mindset of a ratio of there's one company versus to like 10,000 people that they might talk to. That's a lot of work. And so it's almost like the process of getting a job, right? You have to prove that you have the experience and knowledge to do something. And if you don't, how are you going to get that knowledge and experience? Like, what is your plan? And that goes way farther than just coming up to somebody, handing them their business card and expecting something in return.
Absolutely.
And speaking from my personal experience, both as a meetup organizer and also as a broadcaster, when it comes to talking to specific companies, specific devs, they may have things like, for example, I once was working with a company that had specific follower goals and specific things like that, that unless you met these, they will not talk to you. Like, you're not even going to get an email back. So I was very nervous because I hadn't met that goal yet, and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to try and actually represent myself and how this works. The win-win is extremely important that Meta brought up, because you have to kind of look at, I may not be at this amount of followers, but I do have this strength and this strength as well. And representing yourself as a personal broadcaster is extremely important when it comes to actually stepping forward into this industry and seeing what you can do for yourself and your own channel and your own community and its growth. When it comes to being a meetup organizer, not only with your sponsors or with anyone who is there to look at the meetup and what they can gain out of it, you also have to remember that the attendees themselves and every other broadcast that's there will be either a new networking contact or there's someone who you can have come back to the next meetup, keep the meetup going strong, and also your own personal contacts. So being an organizer, it's very interesting to get to meet all of these people, and I see some Twitch Denver people in this audience right now, and they will pretty much tell you that every single meetup I am not sitting down for a single second. I am constantly running around to every single person there, trying to make sure everyone feels at home, trying to make sure everyone feels comfortable, talking to our sponsors, talking to anyone that's there. What you basically get out of a relationship is what you are going to put into it in this industry. So if you want to make sure that you're going to have healthy relationships throughout, either it be personal broadcasts, anything you're involved with as an organizer or anything like that, it's going to be how you present yourself and how you're going to be able to have a conversation with someone like an actual person. Then you'll see what you can get back out of it in this industry.
I think another good point around that, kind of to piggyback off of it, is I know that there's a lot of reluctance sometimes to approach either a company or maybe a larger broadcaster that you look up to. And something that I think is good to kind of remind yourself is they're just people. Like, be respectful, of course, and you should be respectful to anybody you meet, regardless of what you think their status is. It's just, they're human beings. They want to have positive interactions with you. And if you're not necessarily getting the type of interaction you're looking for, don't discount that. They might have something going on. Don't make any assumptions based on a small interaction that you have.
Yes, please. You don't know if they're rushing to a meeting.
Exactly.
You don't know if they got bad news recently. You don't know if they're tired or sleepy.
Exactly.
Like, of course, first impressions are incredibly important, and sometimes those will stick with you forever. And you only have one shot, and if you've messed that up, someone will have like a negative, oh, I don't really like that Jess girl, she was kind of mean, and like you can't really change that, and that's okay, but like you can prove through your other interactions with mutual friends and acquaintances of theirs that like, hey, I'm not such a bad person, I just kind of had an off day, my apologies. So
Yeah, and you'll have a chance in the future to change that perception, and that's actually a really big thing that I learned as I've progressed through my career in the game industry and then now into technology is, if you've accidentally created a negative perception about you, whether it's something small or large, you can change that. That's not set in stone. So the next opportunity you have that oh, I made a really bad impression on this person, reintroduce yourself and correct it. And that might be hard at first because nobody really likes conflict or that confrontation. However, if you really value a relationship with that person, it's totally worth the effort to go and say, hey, last time we went, I was really off. I'm really sorry about that. Can we reintroduce ourselves?
And then even if you try that and they say no, I mean, you might have like a favorite candy or a favorite fruit, and there is someone who totally hates it, and like you can't change their opinion, and that will happen occasionally. You cannot please everyone, and you shouldn't beat yourself up if you aren't friends with everyone. That is a normal part of life, and you just have to move on very gracefully and civilly, and maybe as time goes on, things will cool off, and you can do professional or even friendship things later on in the future.
Yeah, just don't burn your bridges is really, I'm sure you guys have heard that phrase. It's not new.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's very easy to kind of ruin that first impression, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Like, you can always meet someone again later and be like, hey, like, I'm sorry that I was a terrible person or something, like, but like, I'm better now. Like, just stay true to yourself and just remain who you are. And that sounds really, really cheesy, but like, just don't lie to yourself about who you're trying to be.
Yeah.
Be yourself.
And
if
realize
not
that
everyone's
it's okay
gonna like
to
that.
change as a person too.
Exactly.
Everybody
Like,
evolves.
But make sure
Yeah.
it's positive.
Yeah, like not everyone's gonna like that one person that you are, right? Like
Right.
you're always changing, you're always growing, you're learning new things, and you learn, right? Like I feel like that's what this is. It's a huge learning experience.
Yeah, and I think actually that has something to say about if you do have a negative experience, you can make it positive by saying, why did that happen? And then take that and learn from it, because a lot of the time, it's easy to get personally offended by something and not realize that there is an option for you to accept what happened and make it something that you can do better in the future. And maybe you can't. Maybe it was just that person, there just wasn't that, like there never will be that positive interaction.
Right.
But at least you can say, I had that experience and now I can keep that in my mind and say, maybe I can do it differently next time with the next person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the most part, we bulldoze through a lot of our
We just,
main
kinda,
points.
went all over the place right
No,
there.
I love it. I love it. But are there any things that you're like, oh wait, hold on, this was talked about earlier, but like,
I think we should kind of maybe dive into the communities a little bit more, because we talked a lot about individuals as a broadcaster, but there's a lot of, out of curiosity, how many people are part of an actual like meetup group, like community meetup? Okay, not
All right.
bad.
All right.
Maybe you're not because you don't know it exists, so that's definitely a thing. It's really hard to find a
There's a
meetup
lot
in
of
your
them.
area.
You'll find them, yeah.
Yeah, and there's also new ones coming up all the time that haven't quite established themselves, so they're not necessarily broadcasting their presence yet. There's also people that just haven't started one, and so if that's something of interest to you, that's a great way to have a positive influence. Just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's, of course, one of the benefits of building a community of Twitch meetups within your city is that you will get a lot of spotlight on you if you're one of the head organizers. But you also need to realize if that is your one reason to do it, that is not going to be a good community thing.
Yeah.
Because you'll start to focus on, well, how can I benefit getting this hardware company involved and then this video game company that I really like, instead of trying to think of, well, I'm in New York City, so it's like, okay, let me try to maybe focus on games that are that have happened within this village in Manhattan, like try to get like that kind of connection rather than like, I really like games that are in Canada, and like trying to make sure that you're focusing on something in that regard. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, like, I think we should have an open discussion about it, because there's so much to say about community meetups. And so Twitch Texas was the original name that we had, and the reason why I started Twitch Texas as an entire state rather than a city is because Texas is very unique, and there's probably other states like this, but Texas is very unique in that everybody in Texas is kind of like this big family, and no matter how many miles you have to drive, they'll go and help their neighbors. And I actually really love that. I'm not a Texas native by any means. I moved there 6 years ago, maybe 7 now, and immediately it was very evident, especially when I started the Twitch Texas community, that people were they were like this. They created connections so quickly, and it was, I wasn't really sure what was going to happen when I started, to be honest with you. Our first meetup, we had like 12 people, and by the second one, we had 40. And it was one of those things that kind of cascaded out. And at first, it was very focused on broadcasters, and the reason for that was my own decision. It was kind of like a business decision. I wanted to control the growth because I didn't want things to get so out of hand that I wasn't providing value to the community. And that's something that, again, I made a decision for. We could have totally made it a big public thing, but then I wouldn't have been able to accommodate everybody and learn from the experience and make things better before we became a much larger group. And now we have over 500 members, so like that's a lot to handle. No clapping. And that's not me. Like I spent about a year doing it by myself. And we hadn't really moved out into the other cities at that point. It was still like we were trying to pull people from the other cities, and most of them would just travel to Austin because it was more centralized. And then I was like, I have a full-time job. I'm trying to stream full-time. I'm doing all this stuff. Like, I need help. And I looked for people in the community that wanted to be really involved and that wanted to take ownership. So I interviewed people, and I found out kind of what their motivations were and what they wanted to do and what they would like to see as part of like the overall structure of Twitch Texas. And I found 4 people to take over the city chapters, and they've been doing a really great job. First I found 3, and then I actually finally handed Austin over to somebody else, and now I'm focused on the more organizational strategy to help us grow in a bigger direction with local businesses and other partnerships like game devs. So I guess my biggest thing is there's a positivity element in that as well, in that I've seen relationships grow, and I've seen people get new opportunities that they probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise, or maybe it would have taken them longer to get. And so if you guys are interested in starting a community or joining one, know that there is a lot of value in that. And it's not necessarily that you have to grow really big. Maybe it's just a group of like 15, 20 people, and that's totally fine too. You can create a really, really strong connection with those people and then grow from there. And like, we didn't grow to 500 plus people overnight. It took a long time. And there were people that left because they didn't find value, and that's okay. And there's people that joined because they heard about it and they're like, hey, this seems like a really cool thing. And we see new people every single time we have a meetup, which is really nice to see. And I'm just really happy that people find value in joining those groups, because we sit at the computer behind a screen most of the time. And we still need that human, like, face-to-face interaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've talked enough.
No, you're wonderful. Don't worry.
Talking.
Nikki, would you want to add anything?
I'll be coughing up a storm. You go. That's all you. That's all you.
I just wanted to check, yeah. Everything that Meta just said is something, I'm sorry about that. Everything that Meta just said can be easily translated from not just community meetups, but also to individualized communities here on Twitch. One thing I pride myself on as a broadcaster is that if you have walked into my chat at any time, I want you to feel like family. And that's something that I feel like whenever you're doing things on Twitch, whether you're doing it as a meetup organizer, a developer, community manager, no matter what you're doing, the structure of community is extremely important. And the way that I personally have been able to look at my community and, like meetups, grow them slowly but surely, it's staying consistent not just in your times, because anyone can tell you from my community I'm horrible at keeping stream time, but as a full-time broadcaster, that is something that when you look at, once you take that step into full-time, your community is an asset of your stream. Your community is a giant part of what keeps you going as a broadcaster. And so in order to keep that healthy, you need to make sure that you're thinking about not just healthy, how it is, but growing it in a healthy way. So, whatever that may be to you, there is a responsibility to, your financial needs as a full-time broadcaster, and there's, a responsibility to, your metrics, but the biggest responsibility I think that you should have as a broadcaster is how people are going to want to keep coming back to you, your brand, and everything like that. And honestly, for me, I'm very unique in this because I don't really have a brand. My brand is me, and I kind of just get on camera and say, whatever. I pretty much just a lot of people meet me in person here, and besides saying, "Holy crap, you're really tall," they pretty much just say, that, you're basically the exact same as when you're on cast. There's not much of a difference. And I try and make that a personal goal every time I turn on my camera, because I don't want people to feel like I'm trying to put on a show. I don't want people to feel like I'm trying to hide things. If I'm having a bad day, I tell them, guys, I'm going to be a little bit more low energy today. If I'm having a really bad day, I say, guys, I need mental health a break. If I want to later tonight, I'm playing video games. I'll invite some of you guys, who are subs, things like that. I'll be in the Discord. But the way that you need to look at your own community is not as, even though it is an asset of your stream, look at it as something that you're building from the ground up. And that's something that requires constant nurturing, like any, watering a plant or anything like that, requires constant care every day, making sure you're giving 110% to the people who are investing in you.
And also sometimes pruning of
Yes.
things that should not be around. And then also, I'm sorry.
You're good.
Okay. on the flip side of that, I'm a very similar type of broadcaster in that I might be a little bit more perky and lewd and silly on my stream, but it's still me, just a little bit more amplified. But there are some people who want to have that kind of separation and maybe be a character or something like that, and that's perfectly fine too, as long as it's sort of like a positive growth for everyone. You can be kind of a certain type of toxic, but not a negative way in multiplayer games where you're just kind of being silly and goofy and maybe not playing the objective perfectly, but you still win in the end. So there are different avenues, even if you don't want to have your personal self out there, and you can make your own character. I mean, even Beyonce, who's a wonderful, powerful lady, she says that when she's on stage, she's someone else, and it's okay if that's a route that you need to go yourself.
It's literally every time John and I play games together.
Oh, salt. Oh, there's salt everywhere. It's great.
Salt happens. That's okay too. It's okay to be negative as long as you adjust afterwards after the emotions are high and realize okay, maybe I reacted in the wrong way, or maybe I need to take a step back before I say something horrendous. So
You said something interesting about being a different person, and I think we all have different sides to us, right? And that some things we show publicly, some things we show to more intimate personal friends or family members, and those things are okay to rotate out of your life, in different parts of your life. So for me, I run a show, but it's not a fake version of myself or a manipulation tactic. We're putting on a show because we want to be entertaining in this fashion, because we're doing role play. When you're role-playing, I hope you're not role-playing yourself. That'd be really silly.
that'd be very narcissistic.
Strange, yeah.
I'd be role-playing myself. That's lazy.
And the best character ever.
But, I think that there's some really good broadcasters that put on a really good show, and it's high impact, high energy, and it's not for a long period of time. It's for 3 hours. But those 3 hours, you're fully engaged, and you're oh my God, what's going to happen next? And that's great. I love that there's such a huge variety of broadcasters, because for me, I love putting on the show because I can focus on my production value and making it really polished, and I improve that every single week because we do an episode every week. And then, people who stream more often or just do it more casually where they just want to play games and hang out with their community, that's great too, because again, if you're creating more variety options, then your viewers have more choices, which is not a bad thing, especially when there's off time. Like if you're, stream teams can be a really good example of that sometimes, in that they rotate their schedules so that their viewer communities can share the same broadcasting groups, and it's not stealing community. I just want to make sure that's very clear. This is not about.
Streaming is not a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
You're able to have viewers who
Exactly.
watch you and someone else at the exact
Yeah.
same time. And if you look at other streamers as competition constantly, that is incredibly negative, because you should be sharing in the idea that, oh, Twitch is growing and this person has gotten partnered, and that means that more and more viewers are coming in because their viewer might say, one of their viewers might say, hey, to a friend, come and watch this person, they're really entertaining. And then maybe their friend is like, oh, that's not my cup of tea, but then you're playing the same game and they click on you and then they're like, oh, I really like this broadcaster. So there's potential for that type of growth too. And if seeing other people, either friends or acquaintances or strangers, succeed makes you salty or toxic on a very consistent basis, you definitely should take a step back and focus on why that's occurring. And that's usually because there's some in real life issues that you need to sort out first.
Yeah. I feel like it's very important to also realize that just because something works for someone, it's not going to work for you.
Yeah.
For example, I'm a very honest person. I don't really, hold back. I just say what's on my mind and I just deal with it.
Yeah, she is.
There's no filter anymore. And that's me. But I also know that some people like to keep things personal and they like to keep things held back. And that doesn't make me any different than them in terms of how we are as people. It's just we are different, but not in a bad way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that comes down to the whole acceptance thing that.
Yeah.
It's not. I don't think it's addressed enough, and I'm not trying to say it in such a way that we have to blow up and say, acceptance of this group and this group and this group. Because that should be something that we should always be consciously thinking about. It's not like a one-day engagement, right? It should be a daily thing. And when you're having a stream and you notice that there's some kind of a negative interaction in chat around that, it's your responsibility as a broadcaster to be true to yourself. If you believe in that kind of acceptance, you need to nip that in the butt right away.
Yeah,
and say
absolutely.
that's not acceptable behavior in my chat, because a lot of people talk about, hey, I have a really negative chat, and I'm like, well, you're allowing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not because of chat. That's because of you,
It is
because
your
you're not
chat.
addressing
You
it.
have that
Yeah, you have
control.
ownership of
Yeah.
it, so take responsibility.
You
And I'm
are
not-
a dictator
Yeah.
of your chat.
Yeah.
You
No
are
matter
absolutely
how much
in
you want to
control.
say that everyone can say whatever they want,
Yeah.
in the end it is ultimately your decision.
Exactly.
I have that little ban button at the end of the day that if I don't want you in there,
Yeah.
It's great. It's a really
Bye.
nice button. I think the overarching thing to remember about all of this is that no matter what your role is in this industry, you're going to have responsibility, and whether you address it later or something like that, whether it's something that you may have taken too far on stream, or someone in your chat that was just being too toxic or anything like that, your own personal responsibility to address the things that maybe you didn't do is right. If you maybe went too far with something that you realize is not you, is not something that just got carried away in chat, it's extremely important to then come back later and own up to your actions, things like that, and make sure that you are talking things out with your community. You're talking things out with the people that are in your influence, because sometimes we do slip up. Sometimes when I'm playing Overwatch with Nikki, I get really salty and I make a really horrible joke, and I try and go back and apologize if I've offended anyone or anything like
that's
that.
okay. I get you back in PUBG. I just drop randomly, and then I'm like, "We're going," and he's like, "I'm not ready."
I have panic attacks playing with this woman. But I think
great.
the overarching thing to remember is that no matter what, you are able to go back and you're able to say that. But probably the biggest thing is what Jesse said earlier: witch hunts, injustice against you. Things like that can be handled in very professional manners. They can be handled in ways that you feel good going out of it, both as your personal self and knowing that you've done all you can and knowing that you have done the actions that you, with your correct motivations that you have, and then also come out of it in a healthy way, realizing that if this is not resolved, then you've put your energy into this, and that you as a broadcaster can be, sleep soundly at night knowing that you've done what's good for your community, you've done what's good for you, and that you can feel confident in, that you've actually put effort forward. the important thing to remember on that is just putting the effort forward in the first place. Because sometimes we may say something that offends an entire group of people. We may say something in the mix-up that we don't really understand. And then as long as we learn from it, continue and grow as people, that's extremely, as an influencer, as someone who people watch for entertainment and also for inspiration, you've got to make sure that you're constantly looking to what you can improve on in your own speech and your own actions, both social media, on stream, everywhere.
Yeah, that's the type of positivity that we're talking about, growing and making sure that you're just treating your fellow human beings with the decent, basic respect that they deserve for being fellow human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
All
So
right.
I think we have time for questions.
I was going to say,
You're good with
yeah.
questions?
Yeah.
All right,
We
so,
didn't, like, ran
thank
through
you
this.
so much. Those,
Yeah.
those are our main points. If there's anything that you feel like we breezed past, or if you have something that you have a very direct question about in regards to anything that we've talked about, that we have microphones,
mic
I believe, over
there
there
and
and
there.
there, and
In the
we would
wings.
love to take your questions for 20, 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Good.
My name is Super Fennick, and I'm part of a few meetup groups around where I live, but I have a few medical conditions, which means that I can't commit to being like somewhere in 2 weeks at a certain time. And for a lot of people, it could be logistical or physical or psychological or even financial. So how do you make a meetup group that's inclusive while also recognizing that it's like fundamentally prohibitive for some people to show up at a certain place at a certain time?
Go ahead.
Well, in regards to that, like if you are someone who wants to attend a meetup but can't physically always because either like the issues that you said or like the venue isn't accommodating or so, I would reach out to the community organizer and ask if you guys can do some online gaming sort of things or watching movies together to still have that fostering of being able to do it at home where it's a little bit more comfortable, but you're still a part of the community and still get updates about what's going on within the city. That's an
Definitely,
example I would look into.
Yeah, that's true. So actually, one of our solutions for that has been, because it does take a lot of effort and a lot of energy to create official meetups, I actually encouraged our individual members to create like informal meetups where they would just be like, let's go out to lunch on a weekend, or let's do something for the evening, and we go out to a bar. And that, encouraging that kind of behavior is great between meetups because sometimes people can't make it, and that's okay. But the important thing isn't the actual meetup, it's creating that engagement with the community
Exactly.
members. Like that is literally the purpose of the meetups. So
It's-
if you
yeah,
can't
it's-
accommodate them,
it's
that's
to make
okay.
that personal
Yeah,
connection,
yeah.
right? So you're not just two people over a computer screen that have never met and never talked.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, there's not like a solid answer because I can't.
Yeah, there's no formula for
Right.
it, yeah.
Yeah.
But I just, it's hard because, in person, is kind of like the holy grail, but you can't guarantee that for everyone.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you don't want to feel like a second-class citizen because you can't make this stuff, but it's like not your fault that you can't make it, so.
Yeah.
My personal recommendation is going to be talk to your meetup organizer and
Yeah.
try your best to, because I mean, Meta and I know we have an entire Discord for all of us who are the official organizers, and we all talk. We're very social. We're very nice people for the most part. Gamer. But no, the biggest thing to remember is that we're all also people. We want to make sure that things work for you as well. And so if you reach out to us and if you want to make sure that we all are able to make a better meetup for you, make a better meetup for everyone in particular, at that point it's no longer an individual thing. It's no longer, putting yourself out as, in a special situation. It's very much so instead making sure that everyone is able to have a good time, but we can't know that until the opinion's
Exactly.
voiced.
Yeah, if
So-
it's
Yeah,
something
that's
that might have never come to mind that, well, let's do smaller meetups that don't have to be officially sponsored or anything, or let's try to do more online sort of meetups with each other to make sure that we foster that kind of community.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Any other questions?
Hey, so my name's
Hello.
Casey.
Hi, Casey.
It's my
Casey.
first TwitchCon, but
Oh,
it's super
congrats.
fun
Exciting.
so far.
We haven't
good.
Well, intimidating, yeah.
I'm a very big fan of Day 9 a lot,
Alright.
and I watched his big speech on how to maintain and build a community for 5 years, and he's got a very progressive, kind of very positive atmosphere. Lately in my stream, I've been running into kind of people more wanting me to share my political and religious and all that belief. And I kind of don't want to alienate my community. So what would be the best way to go about that? Should I make like a Discord, like just that way it's not out in the open and people who want to look at it can go to that? Or should I just kind of stay away from that?
I guess you could technically do that, and I know that there's a new Twitch feature called Twitch Rooms, so when you are live, you can technically make a room, a channel that says, like, if you want to have these more volatile sort of discussions that might be pseudo-offensive if someone reads it the wrong way, then you have to consent to joining that channel, and then you can speak in there.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good new feature for you to kind of look into if you still want to have those kind of conversations going on within your community while you're live. And then when you're offline, like having a certain channel within Discord and like a group that says like, yeah, these can be very heavy topics, and if there's something that is too much for you, like we have moderators, so you have to have a very strong moderator team that's able to try to tell the difference between if someone's being offensive or just has a very strong opinion that someone disagrees with. So kind of keeping that in mind, and then using the auto moderator to be able to ban certain phrases and words that are very offensive and usually have no reason to be used whatsoever.
I feel like I personally have a lot of these conversations on my chat, like all the time, because, no filter. But I feel like making sure that people understand that it is your opinion, and you're entitled to your opinion, they're entitled to their opinion, and like you don't always have to agree, but being able to discuss it like two adults and to have like a respectful conversation about it is very important.
And yeah, as soon as someone starts disrespecting someone, then it's not
Exactly.
a proper conversation to have
Yeah.
on or off cast or in person or anything like that, and that needs to be nipped.
Making it personal
Exactly.
is where I would draw the line, is like, you should
Yeah.
not be attacking anybody. If you want to have a conversation about your opinion, that's totally fine, but there's really no positive engagement when you're attacking the other individuals who don't agree with you.
And one last thing for me, honestly, is make sure that you have this known. I have this known in my Discord. I have rules about this. When it comes to certain topics, know that the broadcaster, while they may bring it up, is not an expert. Unless you are, trained and, things like that. Make sure that, like, bringing things in here and expecting, this person's going to validate me, everything like that. It's not going to happen for everyone. So unless you do have, those, perfect examples, and those people who have the education that's when, you can have that, but beyond that, you're not an expert, on mental health unless you've been trained in that. You're not an expert
And
on
even if you
politics.
have, you might have an expired license, or it goes against Hippocratic Oath to assist people without having a proper patient and doctor relationship. So like you have to keep those things in mind too.
Yeah, definitely.
Does that help?
Yeah, no, it's totally more of like an opinion matter.
Okay.
I'm like,
Yes.
I don't really feel like, I just want to play some games.
Well,
Oh,
yeah.
if you don't want to get rid of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
do it.
yeah,
Hard
no,
cut,
get
hard
rid of
cut,
it.
hard
Yeah.
cut.
Yeah.
We all just went off the exact same
Sorry.
time. I want to make this very clear.
I have no idea
It's
what
like
I'm
your
talking about.
opinion, man.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Also, I never really thought about actually having physical meetups before, so thanks for
Yeah,
putting
Great.
that.
absolutely. Do it.
Do it here.
All right, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for your question.
Let's go over there.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Amber's Arcade, and to kind of piggyback off of that, I don't know if can you hear me better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Okay.
Hi.
To make that transition, I guess the question is more for Metaphor and Metamancer. When you bridge that gap between sitting in front of your computer screen to organizing these things and meeting in person and everything, did you have any qualms, or how did you get over that opening the curtain a bit more as far as your personal space and where you live and, opening those kind of avenues? Everybody hears those horror stories, but what did you go through with that, and how did you kind of get over it? Because I'm from a relatively large city that, from what I can tell, we don't really have anything like that yet. And it's something I'm interested in, but I still have the really strong filter that I even had. It took me a while even to get the bravery to put my first name in my username for, other reasons. So how did you guys kind of deal with that?
I recently just did a cybersecurity panel, and I spoke a lot about how to have these first lines of defense. So you need to realize that there are going to be shitty and malicious people, no matter where you are in life and what age you are or what industry or group setting you're in, who are purposely either trying to hurt others because it gives them joy or just for the lulz or whatever. And once it goes into harassment stage, there are legal and venues through police officers and things like that that you can do to protect yourself with cybersecurity laws. But from that, it's okay to have your name out there, and it's okay to have that more personal connection in physical, real space. But having certain blocks, like not having your personal, private Facebook public, so they aren't able to see if you check in at home, or like, your mom checks in, hey, I'm visiting my daughter, sort of thing. Going to these different data aggregation websites and contacting them and saying, hey, get rid of my data. I don't want you to have any information about my previous addresses, my current cell phone number, the people that I might associate with, which is usually family and friends and loved ones and marriage certificates and so on. Like, there's a lot of different things within that you can do to help protect yourself. And usually those kind of people who are trying to find out that information, if you have the blocks on the first few steps of how they try to socially engineer and get that information, they usually move on to someone who might be an easier target. I know that might be a little bit different than what you're asking, so I defer to them now.
Yeah, there's that question, there's a lot with that. I have actually encountered cases where I've had to address safety concerns, and that really sucks. Like, having that situation is really crappy. However,
Yeah, and I think not only for someone who's going to organize it, but to kind of let people know that it's okay to come to these things, and we may have the things in place to, if you still want to have that experience, but it'll be safe.
yeah, safety is the number one thing that I have to deal with when I'm hosting events, and I make sure, especially for our larger, we have a lot of conventions in Austin, as a lot of you probably know, like PAX South is in San Antonio, we have RTX, DreamHack, et cetera. And so when we do our larger events, that's much more of a concern for me. And so I make sure that whatever venue we choose has security on site. We make sure that everybody has a way to contact me if they feel unsafe, or they can address somebody at the venue. And that seems like a really drastic thing to do, but there's things that have happened with broadcasters who've been harassed, and there's a lot of things like that where they just don't feel comfortable attending events because of the fact that there's an opportunity for somebody who, and I'm touching a serious topic here, but somebody who's been stalked by a viewer or somebody else, another broadcaster, things like that. That's a real situation. And
It happens more often than people think.
yes.
Because it goes on behind closed doors, and people are ashamed that they let something like that occur to them. And as long as a community organizer, like you say, you're very clear about our anti-harassment policies, and we have a good security force, and we make people realize that the point of this is to be positive and make friends. That usually mitigates a lot of it from what I've seen, but of course there's exceptions and things fall through the cracks.
I also like to let personal friends and family know that even if I'm living somewhere else, don't share my personal information.
Yeah.
That it's completely private for a reason.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's definitely important too, is to make sure that everyone understands this is completely private and it's there like that, and I want to keep it like that.
do you have anything that you want to
Actually, you hit a lot of what I was going to say, but no, honestly, just we haven't had it happen in the Denver community, which has been a very fortunate thing for me. I've been very happy to say that we have a very safe and strong community there, but it's been something, personally, that I've had to deal with doing meetups, is that if there's been, something personally bad that's happened in the background in my life or something like that, and one of those people, either it's been a viewer that's kind of gone a little bit too close, or something that's happened, inter industry, things like that, it can make things really awkward. And so there have been times where honestly there have been, I've done a lot of organization for a meetup, and I've had a little bit of uncomfortability with going myself, but it's been something you need to realize that when you're there, things may have happened in the industry, things may have happened elsewhere, but your safety is important. So taking those precautions is definitely there, but as meetup organizers, it's probably the largest responsibility to us to make sure that those who are coming to the event that we are doing are able to come and enjoy themselves, not feel like there's any air of that happening.
Yeah.
And it's possible, you might want to organize a community meetup, but you don't want to be one of the main faces for it. And so if you can find a group of people who can be all right, do you want to be the president, in the sense of you go there and you shake hands and you check badges, and then I'm the person who finds the venues, finds the sponsors, does the treasury sort of things. There are still things that you can do within the community building aspect and keep your privacy and safety if that is a huge personal concern.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
tossing it here.
Yeah,
Flip-flop.
for the most part, organizing an event just basically consists of calling the venue and then telling the people to come there at a certain time, like at 7 to 9 o'clock. It's a public venue. It should be okay, right, to organize an event? Like,
No.
okay. So what are the things? My inclination would just be to call a venue, do something from 7 to 9. It's at a public
Right.
venue. I'm not going to call a security police force to like come escort people here.
No.
Well, what are you supposed to do to make sure that people feel safe? And then what can you do as far as like making sure people feel comfortable to interact? Like maybe put their name tags with their Twitch name on it instead of their actual name.
Right.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. Honestly, also have a code of conduct.
Yeah,
That's
code
huge.
of conduct.
And when
Absolutely.
people sign up, even if the tickets are free and you use like,
Yeah.
Eventbrite or something, say you must agree to following these rules and regulations to be a part of this community. And you are very clear, like if they violate it even once, oh, I didn't know. Yes, you did. Goodbye, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It-
Make
there-
sure. Yeah.
There is no I did not know. There is nothing like
Yeah.
that at that point. If you
Especially it's
yeah.
common sense. Treat
And make
people
others
nice.
understand that it's
Yeah.
public as well.
Oh, yes.
Like,
Yeah.
make sure everyone knows that it's public. Like,
Yeah.
you're not coming to a private event, you're going to a public area where there are going to be people in the Twitch community or whatnot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
there's
you
also
might
people
have,
that
like-
aren't in the community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you might have a booth area, but it's possible that the local bar people might come over and like mingle or whatever. And that's
Yeah.
fine unless
Yeah.
you pay extra for the venue to like close those
Yeah,
sort of things
exactly.
off. But when you're first starting, that is very prohibitive
Yeah.
towards building, and that's
Yeah.
difficult to do as well too. Especially in bigger cities, like asking for like half the floor is really difficult to do.
It is expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we've got about 5 minutes left, guys. So we're going to try and get one question over there and try and get the guys that are over there. And if you guys still have more questions or anything like that, you guys can come to us afterwards.
Yeah, we'll just hang out there for a little bit beforehand. Hi.
So my question's kind of more personal, I guess. I know that I have my own inspirations for my mental and emotional health, I guess, and doing things that I do. But you guys talked a lot about how you try to be positive influences. Is there any specific person or event in your life that you think about that gives you the kind of strength emotionally and mentally to do that kind of thing? Because
like a-
sometimes we don't just do it on our own.
Like a Patronus kind of thing? That's how I think of it.
Spirit animal, whatever you got.
There's a few things. I know that little things like when my manager at work sends me a message and says like, wow, you're so well organized, or thank you so much for getting that done right away, screenshot it and put it like in my Dropbox folder. Or when viewers send me a quick message saying, thank you so much for casting, I needed a distraction tonight and that was great. Or like really personal things. Just try to remember those things. And whenever I'm feeling down, I kind of go through that and I realize that I am a positive influence, even if my anxiety and depression don't let me believe that at that time. And that helps me get through those sort of episodes.
I like to think about moments where like I may have not done exactly the right thing and then I like push myself to never do that again. And I like to just kind of make sure that I'm behaving in a way that I want to and that I feel is true to myself. So like I know like some people like to think of like the positive things, like someone sends you a message and then they're like, oh, thank you so much for being such a great part of my life, things like that. I like to think of those, but I also like to think of things that I can also work on so that I'm constantly changing and growing and doing more to kind of be a positive influence.
I think,
And-
go ahead. No, no.
Sorry. When you asked that, I almost started tearing up because mine that I personally hold on to is from last TwitchCon. One of my admins made it all the way over from the East Coast to last TwitchCon, and I've had this person in my community for close to two and a half years at that point, and they've stuck by me through everything. And meeting them, they were in tears. They got locked out of their hotel room one night, and I invited them to. Again, don't do this for everyone, obviously. Admin.
yeah.
But I invited her to be able to stay in my hotel room. I set up a nice bed for her on the floor, and she passed out holding my hand. She was really, really stressed out and didn't know what to do. And I made a very poor decision between Saturday and Sunday of last year and was not able to make it to the con on Sunday. And she had to leave Saturday night, and so while I was like really screwed up, I also like made sure I gave her a big hug and everything like that. And I remember specifically I had like a moment of clarity and saw that she was really crying, and she sent me a message afterwards, and that she had been trying her best to get out of her house, get out and meet people, be strong in the community and things like that, and meeting me was a huge thing for her. And I've seen her as a friend for so long, and so she couldn't be here at this con, and so last night I realized that I've never been to a beach before, and I'm going to try to before I leave Long Beach.
Yeah, let's go, man.
hopefully.
I brought a bathing suit.
And so because I've been in the Colorado my entire life, I've been landlocked, and she brought me a shell from the beach because a couple of my subs went, and I had that still in my bag last night, so we put it on the table. I sent her a picture, and we all in the Discord from my Airbnb, we tagged her in the Discord and said that we love you, we miss you, wish you were here.
Aww.
And she messaged me. She was in tears last night. And it's just like that's what I strive for as a broadcaster. Like I try to do my best every single time to make sure that people know that they're more than just viewers to me. Like they're my family. Yeah. And honestly, that's probably the one thing that like every time I feel like I'm down, I feel like if I'm not doing anything right, at least I'm doing that right.
Does that help?
Yeah, no, that was great. I just wanted to know, so.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone,
Thanks,
for coming to our
guys.
panel. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it.